Well, good morning, everybody. Happy 2022 to you. Starting off the year with our first webinar of awesomeness. This is Jeremiah, by the way. I'll be your tour guide through this knowledge trip. We are going to be going through some planting, starting from the beginning, basically kind of assuming that you just got the software and don't know a darn thing. So we're going to hopefully start you from a dead stop and get you going to highway speeds with it. How's that sound? Always good to brush up on the basics though. So even if you're old hat, I bet there's gonna be a couple things that you might pick up from this. So it's always fun, but definitely geared towards people who are starting from zero. So let's get going, right? I have a couple super quick housekeeping items for you. We are recording this, so this is going to be up on the website later today, so you can refer back to it. And there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen that stands for questions and answers. I recommend you click it right now so you can get that little dialog box situated on your screen, because it's nice to have up while you're watching the webinar. You're going to be able to see the answers that I type to other people's questions. And it'll also just be a little quicker for you to type in a question, because you are watching this live right now. So you have that ability to type a question to us and interact with us, which is pretty cool, right? I like that. Anyway, hey, let's start off the webinar with a bang. Boom. Hey, Amanda, let's rock and roll.
Hey Jer, hi everybody. Happy New Year. So if you haven't met me yet, my name is Amanda Marin, a landscape architect here at LandFX, and I'm really looking forward to this year, and having you all here is the perfect way for me to start it, I think. A lot of you then are, like Jer was saying, starting with LandFX, and that's exciting. I've already talked to a bunch of you this week. I know you've also talked to some of our other techs in tech support tickets, and you were sent this link to this webinar because we all know it's definitely going to help, and I wanted to make it help as much as possible. So let's look at what we're going through today. Whether you got LandFX a while ago and you're struggling to get it implemented in your office workflow, or you just downloaded the trial and you want to start on the right foot, you are in the right place with this webinar. Our team here talked a lot about this beginning of the year webinar. We do this every year, this sort of, but we switch around the topics a lot. And we talked about how it'd be different and better than our past versions with this getting started beginners with planting FX. I think the key today is definitely up here, where to start with planting FX. This one's new. And we're going to be talking a lot more about implementation strategy. A lot of the conversations I have with new users ask a lot of questions that are basically, how do I start? Or how do I get everybody else using this too? Once you figure out that it's going to revolutionize your workflow, how do you convince everybody else and actually train them? So we're going to be talking about that. And then we're going to be continuing with some basics in the planting FX tools for those new to planting FX to get your first planting plan done. So I hope you're ready. And please, like Jer said, open that Q&A box and ask a lot of questions. We're going to be setting a lot of time for questions today. Here we go. So starting with how to learn more. I usually end my training sessions with this how to learn list, but today we're going to start with it instead. The best tool you have is knowing how to learn more than I can possibly tell you in 1 and a bit hours that we're going to be spending today. So the first one is webinars like this one. So if you didn't, you might have gotten to hear live through the Zoom link, but if you're looking for other webinars, you would go on our website. You up at the top, at the top right, you'll see resources, videos, webinars, and that will bring you to this page where at the top you can actually see the next live webinar that you can register for, and check out what date that's going to happen. But then you can also see all of the recordings down here. So you can filter by topic, so you can filter by planting like I have over here. You can also search for different things, like you can search for tree remediation and it will pop up with this webinar over here. And you can, once you go to that webinar page to view the recording, I did just want to give a shout out to Jason, who works really hard on our team transcribing these webinars for you guys. Take advantage of his work. I know I do when I send a whole webinar video link like this to somebody just for one tiny skill, maybe at the 30-minute mark. I'll cycle through this synopsis where it tells me exactly where that skill is in the webinar, so I can skip forward to that particular one if you're more looking for something specific. So take advantage of that. The next one is going to be, you can learn with the trainer. This is going to be a big one. You can type land effects, like it's saying down here, into your AutoCAD command line to get this, or you can access it through the ribbon. It's right here. This icon right here will open up this window. And if you click on the tree icon down here, it's going to open up that 30-day challenge. You can do it all in one day if you want to. But it basically goes through step-by-step learning different skills, kind of like what we're doing today, but a little bit more in depth and referring to a lot of different documentation pages and power tips and encouraging you to actually go through the motions. So this is great for when you're new or to save time when you are training other staff that are new in your office. You can give them this, tell them to go through it, check up with them as they go through it during the day while you still work on all of your stuff because you're very busy. The next training resource we have here is Power Tips. If you haven't checked these out, they are really short videos that focus on specific skills, usually advanced skills, but sometimes basic as well as featuring any new tools that we implement in the software. Usually about a month later, we'll come up with a short Power Tip video showing off how to use that tool. So it's here on our website, that same video location. You can go over here to Power Tips and cycle through and filter to planting Power Tips. You can also download, I like them on the phone app. I have it on my iPhone. The app sends push notifications when a new Power Tip comes out, usually weekly. So make sure to go in here. I think there's an icon at the top. You can turn on notifications to make sure that you are getting those notifications each time a new Power Tip comes out, and stay on top of everything. Pass them out to everybody in your office. Say, hey, this is a cool one. We should all learn it. Of course, there's documentation pages, knowledge-based pages. You've probably gone through them already, may have felt a little overwhelmed. So here's how I'm going to tell you to sort through them and find what you need. You can, on our main documentation page, click any of these categories. So you can click on planting and it will open up a whole list on everything to do with planting in our software. You can kind of look through that list and maybe pick out points that you didn't realize were possible in the software and go into their page and learn it. You can also search. So for instance, I searched plant callout in here and it showed me everything to do with plant callouts, including troubleshooting, correcting scales. You can use this search also for if you get an error message. It's really best to always screenshot an error message you get with our software and then put the exact wording into the search box and it will pop up the page for that error message with step-by-step solutions. If you don't see something in there, send it in a ticket to learn more about it or for us to help you find it or figure out a solution right away. We're very responsive on that. Next way to learn beyond this webinar, and a lot of people don't realize this until we tell them, so I wanted to tell you right away, tooltips, the hovering tooltips and the F1 button. So on any of our tools in our ribbons, if you hover over any tool, it will drop down a short explanation, and then if you hover there long enough, it will drop down more of an explanation and usually a little image kind of triggering how it works, kind of a reminder how it works. But if you need more information, you tap the F1 button while you're hovering over that tool, and this drop down pops up. And we've actually kind of hacked into the AutoCAD help page. So F1 will actually bring up our help page for that tool. And usually there's a quick power tip video at the top of that page. You can learn more about it. So that's really quick if you're going through the software and you're like, hey, what's that verify labels tool? That's a nice looking check. You can figure out what that tool actually does on the fly. And the last one is the newsletter. So hopefully you're here live because maybe you saw this webinar coming up in our newsletter, like this last newsletter, and you registered for it. That's great. Now you can open up the Q&A. I keep saying that. I want more questions. And treat this like a personal training. Okay? Ask me questions, ask us questions. Jer's here to help. If you're not here live, because you didn't get this newsletter, sign up for the newsletters. They're weekly, but we keep them short and simple. This is literally all that's in there. The upcoming webinar, the latest power tip about the latest tool, and the last webinar recording. And then about maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months, it'll include important software information like new manufacturers that were added to the software that you requested, or if we think it's safe to upgrade to the latest CAD version. This is where we're going to tell you. So if you're not signed up for the newsletter, you can't say we didn't tell you something. Okay, so the next section then is that big important part where we talk about how to start. I want to help you make a plan with this webinar. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions and we're going to go through the answers, and you can pick and choose which answer you want to formulate your plan. So the very first one is, how many users are going to be using Land Effects in your office? And is it just you? Then the answer is single user. And if it's 2 or more people, it's multi-user. Very simple. The next one is, what kind of installation do you want to do? I don't want to go too far into this because we do have a lot of great webinars that go through this in a lot more detail, and it literally takes up to an hour if you really want to dive in. But really simple answer, if you are a single user, the single computer, single user cloud data setup is going to be probably the best option. Like 99% of you are going to go with that. For multi-user, all I'm asking is please don't set up multiple single user cloud data installs on everybody's computer because you are not going to be able to access the same customized blocks. So look more into these shared server and shared online folder options. Go through the guide and set up a mapped letter drive to a shared location to the Land Effects folder for all the computers, even if it's just for one computer to begin with. That way, as soon as you've customized everything and customized all the blocks, you can easily link up everybody to the same standards. Super easy, and save time for the implementation to everybody part. So that's really easy. Those are my 2 high recommendations. And then the next is, how are you going to set up your preferences at the beginning? So for setting up preferences, it's all about strategy, and that's a lot of what I want you to decide now. And here are some ideas to formulate your plan then. And at the bottom is the method that definitely doesn't work. For single user, I prefer the on-the-go method at the beginning here of just kind of, it's mostly what I'm going to be showing you today. Whereas for multi-user, I like the combo of maybe 1 or 2 days of your lead person who's going to take responsibility for land effects, for the land effects standards, basically redoing a past project to get the most important preferences set up, then either rolling that out to everybody if you're kind of a medium-sized firm, or if you're a much larger firm and you have a lot of teams, maybe just to one team on the first project and then everybody else after that. So make sure everybody knows when you do that for a multi-user setup that if a preference needs fine-tuning later on, that they need to contact the land effects lead who set up the preferences instead of changing it themselves. And that's going to be the best for maintaining your standards and choosing the best standard and avoiding this free-for-all situation that I see a lot. You can lock your preference set. We're going to be talking about the preference set and going into it more. I'm going to actually show you in CAD. So just so you know, you can lock it to enforce that rule if you need to. Now, so you can choose from here which way you want to set up your preferences and just decide it and go for it. And of course, fourth is then once you've set all that up, how do you train everybody else, or are you just training yourself even more? So like I said, you can train with the trainer series yourself, as well as all of those other methods that I showed above. But if you're needing to train others, maybe you're a single practitioner now, but you hire somebody later, I like some combination of the rest of these options as well. Actually, some combination of the 4 of these options. So you can, it takes a big workload off of your trainer, whoever's training new people in your office, if they can just set the person up with the trainer series. But then I do like this create a must-watch list of webinars power tips. I've seen that as kind of an initial step, but then I really like the users who take that a little bit of a step further and create a whole document, a office standards document. I've seen a few of these. They're usually PDFs, and sometimes they even just take a bunch of screenshots straight from our software or documentation page, and even include direct links in the PDF to relevant power tips and webinars. Those have been the most successful. And then they'll do in their own training sessions with other members of the staff as well, especially for onboarding everybody else. Or you also have this option of, we do offer paid personalized training by Land Effects. It's a webinar like this, it's about an hour long, and you get a recording at the end. That is an option, it's not necessary. You can be successful with all of these methods above. But if you want to, this is here for you to make it even easier. Okay. So that was all about strategy. Let's take a bit of time for some questions here. And we're also going to have more time for questions at the end. Open up that Q&A box, but ask your burning questions. I don't want to miss anything today. But here are some of the top 3 that I always get. First one is, how long can I implement? How long is it going to take me to set up land effects in my office? I want a day, I want a time, I want all that. And my answer is, it depends. And that depends on all of those strategies that I just outlined above. For instance, how much are you going to customize, right? If you're just going to use it out of the box and you're like, I'm just going to use all of the land effects defaults, I'm not going to really customize anything. Well, then your initialization period is going to be 1 day. You can get going. But if you need to add in all of your blocks for different plants that you guys always use, and you want land effects to be able to use them, and you want your specialized plant call out, and you need everything set to your CTB and layer names and layer colors and all of that. Each one of those points of customization adds a little bit more time. In general, though, I would say from experience from other users, if you do the whole setup everything before you start a project, usually about a week if you're really dedicated on it, or less. It can take less. We're going to be going kind of through this process in today's webinar, so you can see how quick it can go. Have seen it stretch out to about a month when they did it in between a lot of other work and a lot of other projects. They weren't really dedicated to it. But even then, I mean, that's the length of your 30-day trial period. So I usually tell people when they're in the trial period, use it like you own it and customize it completely. If you do the setup on the go, like I said, it can, if you're sole practitioner, it can take 1 to 2 days maybe to get the hang of it, but you're off to the races from there. Can you customize? Whatever your question is, can you customize it? Usually the answer is yes. You can send in a ticket and ask, or if you're here live in the webinar, you can just pop that in the Q&A button. But I do want to mention a big note. I'm going to read it out. Seriously reconsider your office standards. And that's in quotation marks for a reason. They are preferred styles. And if you go to your boss and you say, hey, if I customize, like I run a schedule and then I manually edit it, it's going to take me 4 hours each time. But if we change our style to go with the Land Effects available defaults for a schedule, it takes 3 clicks. 4 hours versus 5 seconds, which one do you think your boss is going to go with? If it saves that much money, they're going to go with the easier one. So it's more about kind of figuring out where it's advantageous to you to change standard style preferences. How much time will I save with planting FX? You'll save time on your first project. The second project will be faster. I've been challenged on this. I've said it before, I've been challenged on it and I was proven right. So I'm going with this. Personally, I've cut down boulevard planting plans that used to take like 2 weeks down to 3 or 4 days. Once I did planting FX plus details plus reference notes, once you start actually customizing and creating templates for everything, it really, really develops quickly. And every project gets a little bit faster over the years. But Jarrett, were there any really good questions that would fit in at this point?
Oh my gosh, we've had some really good questions. So thank
Okay.
you guys very much. I've been able to answer them fine. I think there's nothing we need to pause for right now because I know we're a teeny bit stressed for time. But we'll definitely circle back at the end and recap what we need to.
Okay, perfect. So we're moving on then. We're going into CAD. Here's your support lines if you need it, but beyond all that support that I outlined above. Here's our outline again. You can see what we've gone through and what we still need to go through. I did want to note, I initially wanted to throw in some CAD basics to set up a plan, but I quickly realized that this webinar would be about 2.5 hours if I did that, and you guys wouldn't last through that. So instead, I'm going to point out some other webinars if you need help putting together an AutoCAD-based plan and an XREF setup, or if you want to see how you can improve your existing drawing and title block setup workflow instead. So if I just kind of go out of here and go to our website. So here's our homepage, landeffects.com. If I go to that resources, videos, webinars, here we go. And I go over to AutoCAD and FXCAD. I can see right here, I have CAD for beginners 1, 2, and 3. If you've never touched AutoCAD, start here. If you have some experience in AutoCAD, maybe again, go through those those liner notes that Jason types up and see where you probably should start in this series. But it never hurts to start from one and relearn your bad habits into good habits. Another one I really like, so we've got all about plotting here, as well as drawing setup using an image. A lot of people ask, how do I use a Google Earth image or a PDF? This is where you want to go. As well as if I go kind of out of here, one of our recent webinars was the Sheet Set Manager and Land Effects. If you're watching this later, you can always search in here for Sheet Set Manager. This is Sheet Set Manager, but I actually like, if I go to Setup and search Setup, this sheet setup and management is an easier method of just setting up a title block and the drawing setup that I'm using today without going into the more advanced Sheet Set Manager. So I would actually watch this first before the Sheet Set Manager if you're new to this. The last one I really like, if I just go back to webinars, is just webinars. It was migrating existing plan into land effects. Actually, I think it was under planting. There it is, migrate an existing plan into land effects. So this is one method if you kind of want to start with a drawing that already has a lot of blocks in it, that you're halfway through or you're redoing an old plan. This is the method that you're going to want to follow. It's going to be really quick and you can replace all those old blocks with smart blocks. But instead today, we are going to just be starting from scratch. Just a blank drawing, no plants placed at all. So kind of like the workflow you'd be doing for a new project and setting up your preferences on the go. So that's what we're doing, segue into CAD. So let's look at our ribbons. If you've installed Land FX and Planting FX correctly, you're going to be seeing all these ribbons. If you just have Planting FX, you don't need this Irrigation FX ribbon. If you have Irrigation FX as a license type, it does include the planting tools as well. So you will have all of these and that will be fine. We are going to start over here on the FX admin ribbon. And we're going to be looking at our preferences. So our preferences are actually in two places. They're over here, planting preferences and plant size preferences. And we also have them over here on the FX planting ribbon. If I drop down over here, I have planting preferences and plant sizes preferences. I also have save plant blocks. So that's kind of a little heads up that yes, you can save your own plant blocks. But I'm going to be focusing on this one. Let's go to planting preferences. If you're brand new to Planting FX, this is where you're going to want to open up first. And we are going to set a few, change a few defaults to your preferred style, even before you start a project. First, you need to choose between imperial or metric. I have one over here where I was kind of practicing for this webinar, but if you've installed from scratch, you will just see imperial and metric down here right now. We are going to be improving this, but as of today, this is how it looks. And you need to choose between them. Today, I'm going to be doing a metric drawing, but everything that I'm going to be doing today easily done in imperial inches, architectural inches, or decimal feet, no problem. You would choose imperial. I'm going to choose metric. And before I start changing things, I actually want to do something a little bit awesome. I'm going to click manage. You can see the manage preference set. You can see where I can set things by user with admin permissions to change things if you need to. Be careful with that. Do try and set 2 admins just in case somebody's computer blows up. It's set to the computer, but I'm actually going to just click new on here. And what this is going to do is make a complete copy of this preference set under a new name. And I'm going to name this as 00 so that it falls alphabetically first in the list. And then I am going to set this to your company name, maybe a short form of the company name, and preferences, keeping it kind of short. So maybe AMLA, Amanda Marin, LA. I like that name. Yep. Good morning, landscape architecture. And then I'm going to put prefs. There we go. Nice and short, to the point. Okay, this is my office's personalized, customized preference set now. And it pops up at the top of the list, so all new land effects projects are going to use it by default. Now that I'm in here, I can start changing things. So the first thing I want to look at is plant code. I need to decide between 6 letters and 2 letters. Really, it's personal preference. I can make a strong suggestion that you change your standard to 6 letters, only because I started in an office that did it 2 to 3 letters for all of their plants. And when I moved them over to 6 letters when we started with land effects. And oh man, did the city officials, the contractors, all were like, oh my God, your plans are so easy to read. Because I mean, if it says ACE as the first 3 letters, and it's pointing at a tree, it's a pretty big indicator it's an ACER. So it just meant less relying on like flipping back and forth between the schedule and the plan for people trying to read it. So that's the benefit of that. But again, personal preference. Try not to flip between these. Try to act for a lot of these that we're doing right now. You want to settle on something. You can change it later, but try not to flip between the options. Just settle on one. The next thing I want to do is choose a plant callout. When you first install, this may be completely white. It's because you haven't downloaded the slides yet. And when you open it up and click on that box, the white box, you'll see it down here filtering through the command line. It'll start downloading all these slide images of our defaults. You can choose something that's pretty close to what you want to use, like maybe your standard is more like this. Don't worry about this saying the 6-letter code right here. If you've chosen 2-letter codes, it will fill in whatever code is in the plant data. Don't worry about that. But maybe this is a point in time where you look at the available options and you think, hey, what if we did the same thing but with a field 1? That's the first size field in our plant data. You'll see this later. But like you probably didn't include that because it was a lot of work to fill it all in manually. But now if Land Effects is filling it in automatically for you, it might be really good information to have just on hand inside your planting plan without having to go all the way to the schedule. So consider things like that. I'm going to actually choose this one and we'll see what it looks like. Definitely choose an M leader. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. You need to pick a landing distance. This is just if you click and label a plant, whether it's a fixed landing distance between the second point and the actual label, or if you manually pull it across. See what I mean? I prefer manual myself. You can choose an arrow style, whatever suits your fancy. Concept label, honestly, I would edit that when you get into concept plants. You do want to have a look at these plant groups. I can open that up and I can see right here I have trees, and then it breaks it down into types of trees. These are like subcategories. We call them plant groups, and mostly it is a way for you to eventually filter your plants so that they separate themselves in a schedule. You'll see what I mean. But there are different plant groups for each category of plant. You're going to see these categories around a lot. They are suggestions. So you want to go through all of these, and maybe you might change them now. You can definitely change them and adjust them later as well. I'm going to say okay. Leave schedule defaults until after you've done your first schedule, and basically everything else in here should be fine. You might want to choose between remain and paper model space and paper space. That's just for labels. If you're doing our recommended method where I have my planting drawing in model space and my sheet in another drawing. You can't label through an XREF, so you will have to remain in model space and label here in the model space drawing. Keep that in mind. Okay, next I want to go to plant sizes. And again, you can see trees, shrubs, shrubberies, ground covers. This is a common theme. And under here are the different available fields for when we assign data to plants, what kind of information we can assign to plants. You do want to go through these at the beginning and set them to how you want them. These are all completely editable. You don't need to stick with what we've put here as default. You can change container type to whatever you want. You can also delete or add different entries in these. If I click down to this radio button, I can see all the different container types I have in here. You can edit and delete and add new. You can also add another column for even more information than we have by default. And this just leaves the door open for whatever you want. I've seen people, one person recently asked if they could put weight in here because they do a lot of plans on rooftops. I've seen people use this for wookles in California, which is a water use standard. I've seen fields for diameter at breast height, DBH, all of that. So as you go through here, you'll notice though, if I add that in and I click new and I say, oh, this tree is going to be 500 pounds at mature weight. If I click through to shrubs, I don't have that weight category. So you will need to drop down and add the category to each one of these because they're all different. As a recommendation, as you're going through this, try and keep field 1 and field 2 very similar between all of the different categories. You can even just have one field if you want, but I've seen people where they had wookles and it was field 4 in trees and shrubs, but then shrub areas, it was field 5 and or 6 in ground covers. And these relate to the columns that end up in your schedule. And we'll have a look at what that looks like. But basically, you want your columns to line up with similar information. So if your weight is in field 3 for trees and you do want weight for shrubs and shrub areas, put it in field 3. That's what I want to say. The last thing we want to look at for preferences to set up is here in general, the general section. First, you want to go through and make sure the text styles match your font and size. So say if I go to plant callout, we're going to be using that a lot today, and edit it. It's just going to ask for a scale. I'm going to set it to 1 to 100 for now, because I know that's what my plan is going to be. But if you're in a blank drawing, it won't matter what scale you set this to if you're just setting up preferences in a blank drawing. By default, this is Stylus ITC Bold, which is a version of Stylus BT that is bold. But you can change this to Swiss 721. You can change it to Arial, whatever you want to use in your office. Note of caution against using fonts that are not installed by default with AutoCAD, Windows, or LandFX. There can be problems installing fonts and them actually getting background names different between 2 different computers. It could cause a problem in here. Be aware of that if you're having font issues with LandFX. But Arial's a pretty safe choice. Point size relates to, like in a Word document, how actually big it is. 10 is the default. Please try not going below 8-point font. It becomes illegible. Okay, I'm going to stick with that. I've set my plant callouts to Arial. You can go through all of these text styles and make sure the font's the right size. The next one you're gonna want to go through is layers. I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to go through how to do them exactly in here. Again, it's a whole other webinar, and we have a great guide on our documentation on how to do it. Keep in mind, this is for matching our layer colors and names to your standards. Do know that you need to edit them here in the layers list and also in this block layers list. The difference between the two is everything in the layers list is created on the fly by LandFX. There's two ways LandFX creates layers: on the fly, in which case it needs the layer name and the color, or by importing a block where the layer is already set up with a name and a color. In that case, you just have to change the color from one to the other. So that's it in a nutshell. If you need to change to match your Office CTB, follow the guide, the whole worksheet for that. Last thing you probably want to change is numeric display. That's just to change it to the units in your area. I'm going to leave it all as default for now though, and I'm going to say okay. Okay, so those are the main stuff that you want to just change at the beginning, and the rest we can kind of do on the fly. Let's see where I'm at. Okay, so I've got my CAD plan set up here that I'm gonna show you guys with. I've got an XREF on an XREF layer to my base file. I've got a planting drawing with my model space set up here, and I've got that XREF'd in. If I open up my XREF manager, there we go. I can see in this sheet, I have my base file and my planting file both XREF'd in as overlays in here. And I've already figured out what scale this area where I'm doing my initial planting design is going to be. I personally used, to figure out the scale, I used our plot scale tool. I have a power tip actually that shows you how to use that, where you double click inside here, run the plot scale tool, and it will quickly size your viewport for you, and then you can lock it. So I figured out my scale is going to be 1 to 100 for metric. I think that's around 1 to 20 for 1 to 20 or sorry, 1 inch equals 20 feet or 1 inch equals 10 feet, somewhere around there for imperial. And so with all of that set up, I need to go back to my workspace drawing and do the very first step I do for any LandFX plan, and go to FX admin and to project list. And that opens up my project list. And for you, if this is the first time you're doing this, this is going to be blank. There's going to be nothing in here. I just have a whole bunch from my trainings and my other webinars that I have already set up in here. So with yours being blank, you of course are going to have to click new in order to make a new project. The rule with projects is you have to make a new project for every design. You can use the same project between multiple DWG files of the same site design, planting design for the same client, but you need a different project for each new design. You can copy the plants between them, that's fine, but you want them to be copies so that you can edit the plant details in one design and it won't affect the plant details in the past design. That's very important. But I'm going to click new, and we're going to set up a project. You need a project number and you need a project name. If you have, say, if you already number your design projects, maybe in your invoices, use that number right here. If you don't number them, here's a suggestion. I like using the current year and then just a counting up system. I like to start with 002, and then I go up by 2s so that I can shoehorn in a project that relates later on if I want to. For name, I like putting in the address, so 777 Slow Road, and maybe the client, Marin. Short and to the point. I'm going to give you some advice on setting yourself up for success with LandFX and creating good habits early on. And I'm going to tell you to set a detail folder right now, even though we are not covering details in this webinar. I'm going to click browse and just get you in the habit of this. I'm going to go to projects for a project specific detail folder. You have an option of how to organize this. We have a webinar and a power tip on suggestions. just for now, hey, let's make a 2022 folder. You can click new and say I'm creating a 2023 folder for next year. I'm just going to call it 2023 and code 2023, and that creates a folder. Whoops, it created it in there. That was a mistake. I need to actually highlight the projects folder and click new. There we go, 2023. You can learn through my mistakes mid-webinar. There we go, that creates a top level folder like that. So I can click on the 2022 folder then, since this is a 2022 project, and click new and create a folder for this project. So I'm going to call this 777 Slow Road Marin, like that. And I'm going to actually name it the number I did for it, 002. This is just how I like to do it. You are not limited by my suggestion. You can branch off in a way that works for your workflow. I say, okay, that creates that folder, and I'm going to click that folder and click OK. There we go. We're not going to use it for planting, but you are now set up for success in your workflow. You can ignore this or set to the correct preference set that we created before, and we can move on. That opens up the project manager, basically confirming all the details that I just created for that project, and we're good to go. I can click OK on this. And you can actually follow along with this even in a blank file if you want to. You don't have to have this XREF set up for the rest of this. So the first thing I want to do after I've done my project and before I place any plants is I want to set my scale. So like I said, I already figured it out. I set up a layout space. I figured out how big my viewport was going to be scale wise. I need to set that as a scale here in LandFX as a plot scale. LandFX uses this plot scale in order to figure out how big that plant call out text should be. So we told it to be 10-point font. It needs to know what scale it's at so it knows how big 10-point font is going to be in model space or in paper space. That's essentially what it's doing. So again, you can click imperial and do a decimal feet or architectural inches scale. Again, we're going to be doing metric, and I already know that my viewport is 1 to 100. And my drawing units in this model space are meters. That's all very important. So step 1, create a project. Step 2, set the scale. Step 3, add a plant. Let's go over here to FX planting again, this ribbon up here. I'm going to go all the way over here to the left-hand side. I can drop this down or just click on it. The very first option is going to be the plant manager. That's what we're after. That opens up this nice little handy window. You can again see the categories: trees, shrubs, shrubberies, and ground covers. These are suggestions, not rules. You can put a tree species in shrub areas, whatever you want. Just manage your plant groups accordingly. I'm going to click new to just add a plant real quick. Our first plant. So this is what your window is going to look like right out of the bat. You can see a lot of options going over here on how to find things. We have 43,000 and counting. We're probably up to 44 now. And basically I can search through this. Let's go ahead and search maybe Pinus. That search, that's gonna bring me right to pines. Now I have a lot in here. Maybe I want to filter by my area. So I can go to filters. And I can filter by a hardiness zone, 8A or 8B maybe, and it's telling me how many plants there are in our system that match that filter. I can apply filters. And there we go. Here's are all the pines that match that filter. So I'm going to go to, let's see. I'm going to go to Niagara, maybe. And these are all the Austrian pines that match that. So let's go with Oregon. Teardrop sounds good. I'm going to add that to the project, and that gets added to the project. Now I can keep going here, keep searching for all of my trees and keep adding them in, and they get added into this plant manager. I can also say clear my filters, clear my search, delete, and go over to shrub areas. You see that switching over the plant manager too. Oh, clear the filters. And let's search for a bottle brush plant. Oh, not V. CALL, I think. I'm even just doing CALL, and it kind of brings me down to all the CALL genus and common names, and I can pick out the one that I wanted. I wanted citronous. There we go. And I wanted the Endeavor citronous. So you can see we have a lot of different varieties going on in here, and basically everything in here has been suggested by a landscape architect at some point who was using our software. And if they don't see the variety that they're looking for, you can add new plant, and you can go ahead and add your very own variety in here. So Amanda, the Amanda variety, and this is the Amanda bottle brush. I'm going to say okay. And that will filter back to it. But you can see that it's added that for me right away for me to add to my project. There we go, it's added to the project. But what that also does is it just pings us, and somebody in our team goes through and makes sure that that's a real plant and then adds it to this whole list for everybody else. So obviously Molly's going to look at this, and she gets so many of these plants for me during all my trainings, she's immediately going to throw it in the trash because it's not a real plant. But while you do that, I do recommend clicking this data button and going ahead and refining this data, maybe adding a photo as you go. So it's, we are kind of wiki basing our data to quickly fill out all of these filters for all of these plants. So you get badges for doing more of them. I'm just going to close this and say done and kind of go with this for now. Oops. Okay, so we have added our plants. Now we got to edit these plants. So if I edit this Amanda bottle brush and click edit in the plant manager, all of this information at this point is still editable. So if I want to completely change the botanical and common name and code at this point, different than it is in the master project list, you can do that here. And then you can import all of this information you set up using this button into future projects as copies. It's great. So I can go ahead and set up everything here as if I'm going to use this plant again in the future as well. So maybe this bottle brush is about 25 bucks to supply in place. It's a 2-gallon pot. Again, I don't have that third column here because I didn't set it up in my preferences for shrub areas. I only did it for trees. I can set a spacing for my shrub areas. Maybe for this one, I'll put in 700 millimeters, which is a little over 6 feet, or not 6 feet, a little over 2 to 3 feet. And then I want to set a symbol. So I'm going to click on this symbol. I have all of these options for line types for a shrub area. I'm going to choose this one. And then it goes over to hatches because this is an area that it's calculating the spacing of these plants. So I can click on that hatch. There's lots available. I can set up a color right away. So let's go with a nice green color. I can do a gradient or I can do a solid. And then it's going to ask me for that hatch again. I can change the hatch here too. But that's basically this plant setup. I can also have a look at the plant data at this point. These are all really handy additional data points beyond the fields that you can also include in the schedule later on. I'm going to say okay. And that's set up. Let's do that again for the tree. And you can see how it's different. So I can edit that one. Again, all editable. Maybe this one's 350. You can see that additional field that I set up here. I'm going to say this one's maybe 150 centimeter height. That is about 5 feet. Container type, maybe this one is a wire basket or bare root. And I can choose that weight, or I can click add new and say this one's going to be 650 pounds. There we go. That one's added. It also adds it to the standards as well, if you are allowed to edit the preferences. I can change the symbol width of the pine. Maybe 6 meters is quite big for a pine. Probably it's going to be more like 4 meters or 12 feet. Symbol, I click on this, I get a whole bunch of different symbols. The symbols are different between trees and shrubs. They're the same between shrub areas and ground covers. It's just ground covers, you don't choose that outline. So for trees, I have lots of options to choose from: evergreen, deciduous. Obviously for a pine, I'm probably going to go conifer. Maybe I go for something like this. You are not limited by these. You're not even limited by these folders. You can add your own company folder to the beginning here if you want to bring everybody to that. So I just set that, set a color symbol. Again, different color symbols. You can see it all downloading right now. There we go. And I am going to go to, evergreen, just improve this to sort it a little bit more. Maybe I'll go with that color. Great. I'm going to leave it at that. That gives you a good idea of the difference between the two. Now we're going to go to placing. So I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to place. And we are going to go a little bit beyond an hour today. We did plan on that. So as I'm placing it, I can just kind of click, or I can place 3 or 7 or 10 all at once. And I can cycle between all the different versions, patterns of 10. I can make this wider. I can make it smaller. I can make it dance. And you're probably wondering what I'm doing. And basically, when in doubt on any land effects command, you want to look at the command line it's telling you what to do. So it's saying choose a position, or tap K to look at your shortcut keyboard commands. So I tap K, and you can see what I was doing. I was tapping the 3 key, then the 7 key, then the 0 key for 10, and I kept tapping 0 to get all those different patterns. I tap W for wider spacing, S for smaller spacing. I have a lot of other controls in here that you can play around with. We have a great power tip that goes into this in more details, but let's look at copy along line, arc, and polyline. So I'm going to tap 1 to go back to 1. I'm going to place 1 down, and I'm going to tap V for copy along a line. And then I can change the spacing by tapping 1 and saying I want this every 6 meters exact spacing. Bam, 6 meters exact spacing. I can tap C, pick a midpoint, and copy that along an arc like that. Midpoint, arc. Right? Now I'm going to show you really a quick trick to show you something along here, or actually maybe in here. I'm going to go to shrubs. I have no shrubs in here. Here's that import tool we talked about. I'm going to go to my test project. Maybe this is the first project you ever did. It shows me the shrubs that I used in that project and set up. I click add to project and done, and I get that shrub that I set up in a previous project. So that's the power that you're going to eventually get here. Everything's set up with the cost. I've already set up all the symbols. So I can go straight to placing this one. So maybe I place this one just along in here. And then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go all the these placing tools are also up here in the ribbon. I'm going to go copy along a polyline. I'm going to grab this building's polyline. Oh, I need to bring this into the drawing. So I'm going to go N copy and bring that 0, 0, 0, 0. Now I have a polyline in here in this drawing, and I am going to copy that along that polyline. I get this guide, and I have some of the same controls as before. With the other one, I can choose the spacing exactly if I want to. I'm right clicking to end, and that guideline goes away. And then I can right click again, and that ends the command, and I've got all those shrubs nicely placed along a line. Let's move along. So maybe I want to place a shrub area. I had those shrub areas in here. So I'm going to draw this little area right in here, close. And I can go to that shrub area that I had, and I can click place. And it's going to ask me to select a polyline to hatch. You can also draw a polyline on the fly, or you can pick multiple if you want an island in between. I click that polyline, and it creates that hatch at an appropriate scale for the scale I set up here, with my line type on it as well. And that line type's even on its own layer. In fact, everything that I'm doing is on its own layer, on an appropriate layer as I go along. I haven't been changing off of layer 0 as I've been drawing, which is usually a bad thing, but it's not with Land Effects. These are all placed individually, so I can go in here and fine tune as well if I need to. Now let's label. Actually, before labeling, really quick, some other tools up here. I can match plant. So I can grab this one, I can grab that plant, and I can make a copy. You want to do this instead of the regular copy command. You want to do that match plant. I can also match properties. So if I drop this down, I see match plant properties. I can click it, I can click that, and I can click that, and it changes it into that shrub completely, not just a block. If I use this tool, edit plant, I can click on that shrub and see that it totally changed the block to completely different plant info. This is the great part. I haven't even started labeling, but I've placed all these blocks. If I forget what plant I've placed down here before I start labeling, I can use edit plant and figure out what it is. The last one, highlight, is really helpful if you want to highlight where all of those shrubs are or all of these trees are in your plan. Lots of different ways to use highlight. I'm going to run highlight again and right click to get rid of that highlight. Let's label. So I've got my labels here. I'm going to group label. Click that plant, window. There we go. And I'm going to place that down. And so that was that manual landing distance. I can place additional leaders on here if I want to. This is an actual M leader now. And so I can go here, right click, and remove leaders if I want to. It totally counts those up. I also have options like I can do different label styles. I'll just show you connecting arc as an example. Click one plant, click the next plant, click a midpoint for the arc, it creates that arc. Right click and place the label. And these labels are now placed at the correct scale for that 1 to 100 scale. Now, if I've kind of labeled everything on my plan, I might want to check that I've labeled everything correctly. I'm going to go verify labels. And it's telling me unlabeled plants are circled in cyan. So my shrub area over here is not labeled. So I can grab a single label and label that one. I can grab a single label and label this shrub over here. And I can grab a group label and label all of these. I'm just going to grab all of them. And if I run verify labels again, it's like, hey, you didn't quite get it. You double labeled these. So I can delete that label. And finally, eventually get to the point where everything's labeled correctly. So double check your work that way. Once you have, one thing I did want to mention, highlight. If you highlight a label, it will tell you which ones it's labeling specifically. It works with hatches as well. I right-clicked to end that command. Now, did want to show then schedules and color render. So schedule, I'm going to save this drawing. Now that I've assigned it to a project, I'm going to go to this sheet, and I'm in a different drawing. I need to assign it to the same project. So I'm going to click project list, and I'm going to find that project in my list. There it is. And I'm going to say open instead of new. I want the same project between the two drawings. Great, it's the same project. I want to reload my XREF. Great. And now I can run a schedule including XREFs. So I'm going to go to schedule down here. It's also up here in planting FX ribbon, plant schedule. It's the same tool. By default, you might want to check out how it looks if you just go with the total defaults and then go through all of these options to change them around, like maybe a table style, or maybe include cost, or include symbols if you want. Include concept plans if you get to that. Change what kind of columns there are for the botanical and common name. I'm going to leave the defaults and click OK. Asking for the upper left corner, I'm going to click this down, see how big it gets. So it's a little bit big. I might want to figure out a slightly different standard, but it's a block, so I can kind of move it. F8. I can move it down here all together where it fits a little better. But you can see all of those different fields are now columns over here. It's counted up all the quantities, and actually, just to make sure you saw that, I'm going to say no to look at the options again. I included XREFs, so that's why it's including all these quantities for the plants that are actually in an XREF. Now I can go ahead, delete things, update it, regenerate the schedule. You saw when I ran the schedule tool, it asked to regenerate. You click yes, and it will update based on all the information that you've changed. So you can go ahead and edit the information on plants. You can delete plants, you can add plants, and this schedule will update. And this is a non-plot timestamp so that you can see when it was updated. So those are the basics for your first project, and then maybe you go a little bit further on your first project and do something you never really could do in a second. Go to presentation, go to color render, and I already set up all those colors before as I was going on the go. So I'm just going to click on, and it's going to swap those all out with their color versions. So guys, in like 20 minutes on your first project, you can have a color rendering. You can take this over to Photoshop, make it even better, save a lot of time in Photoshop that way. But yeah, I think this is a great time to then look at some questions. This is basically it on the basics, but hopefully you get the idea of how to start with your first project in Land Effects, customize some of the main things first, and then just do the rest on the go. That's my favorite strategy. Yeah, just click that add new, go in later as you hit a wall, and then go into your preferences and make the adjustments as you go. Let's see, we put some time away for questions. Jer, what do we got?
Absolutely. Yeah, and for anyone, I was able to, of course, type everyone an answer, and I just wanted to say I was kind of, it was a slew of questions. We got a lot of questions, and I was amazed that literally every single answer is a link to either a documentation article or a power tip or a
Oh, cool.
webinar. Every single question. And really that is the best thing to say, because we could sit here all day and you guys could type a question to us and we could then send you the link to a power tip video. But you might want to cut out the middleman and just go to the website and search for these questions yourself. But certainly just know that in the future, when you are struggling on something, pretty much anything you search for it, you're going to find that we have that answer, and usually as a nice polished little power tip video, which is really slick. um, I mean, I wouldn't even know really where to start with which of these we necessarily need to backtrack on. But I mean, just asking about why XREF the planting plan into a sheet file. How do you save custom blocks in? How do you change the label style?
Mhm.
All of course these standard questions that we get all and over, because as you can imagine, so many of these different questions, and you can see there's still a couple more coming into the
Oh, there
chat
are. Yeah,
window.
we're gonna have to hang around a little
So
bit after the recording to answer some of these questions.
exactly. So I'm not sure, what you're up to, how much longer you want to go, but if you want to maybe show changing the label style, or in this last one that just popped in, can you arrange plant symbols automatically within a shape? I think that means essentially to fill
Autofill.
a polyline area with
Oh
shrub
man,
symbols.
we're
That
working
that's
on it.
that's that's the one we don't have a link for.
We don't
Finally,
have it.
Isabel does ask something that we don't have something for. The problem with that, Isabel, in case you're wondering, is just get to fill a kidney bean shaped area with shrub symbols. To do it quote unquote perfectly, which is what we demand, is an incredible amount of math, and we just have not been happy with our prototypes of doing it.
Yeah.
And certainly to do two things perfectly, but also quickly. Now, there is code I've seen, real sample code, typical in computer science classes. Fill this area with jelly beans, right, and do it as efficiently as possible, and it will render like it's rendering something, and it could take 2 minutes, literally, because it has to juggle all the little plant symbols around a teeny bit over and over and over and do thousands and thousands and thousands of iterations.
Hmm.
And you don't got time for that, right? Nobody got time for that. So what we want is an ability to do it quickly, but also just spectacularly. And so that's the tricky one. But
Yeah, because I guess I'm kind of showing here, we have some tools where you can array them out, but then of course you got to go through here and kind of get rid of them, but we didn't quite like that one because you get this weird jagged line that really doesn't totally fit the shape very well. We didn't really like that one. And then we've gone through with these
yeah,
are
yeah.
just some ideas of how you can do this manually though as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Another method that I kind of liked was the way we were going on it. I do an offset of about half the distance. I'm just going to snap for simplicity's sake. And then use that copy along a polyline. So I go to 0.0 over here and use copy along a polyline, grab that, copy it all the way along like that. And then you can keep doing that, going in and in and in. You can already see the problem though of one thing that we're trying to address is you get this gap where it's not going to offset anymore. So that's where we're like, where do we go between manual and if I go there to there, apologize while I'm trying to do this real quick and go in, you can see the funky offset that would be next and we miss all the plants in here. So that's those are the two ways that I would do that manually in the meantime until we work out that system.
And also, I guess we didn't. Did you show paint at all? I mean, that's
Oh, I didn't. Yeah.
also
Oh, that's
something.
true. You could totally do that. You can grab, let's do match plant, grab that plant. Oh, not that's it defaulted to my last one, which was match plant properties. You can see the icon switch there. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to pop that in about here and those keyboard commands, T was for paint mode. So I'm going to tap the T key and I can go like that and kind of randomly fill them in, but you can also do that just within the outline and then clean it up afterwards instead of array. That's another method. Yeah, I think there was a question was, are grasses and perennials supposed to fit under ground covers?
Yeah.
And I think, again, you're not limited. Actually, that's a really good question, because I would say that grasses and perennials could easily fit in shrubs, shrub areas, or ground covers. So it really depends on how you want to display them. Like that shrub areas has that nice little plotting outline around here, but ground covers has a non-plot outline. It doesn't have a line type for sure, even if you make that line plottable. Whereas if you want to show the grasses and perennials as individual little symbols, then obviously you put that into shrubs. So really that kind of plant group could be in any one of these categories depending on how you want to display them.
And I think we're at hour 15. I think it's probably time to sort of wrap up, but with one really, really important point, which is we will be following this up because obviously there's the interest level, and we're really enjoying the questions that we're getting, and so we will be following this up. We just haven't necessarily nailed down the date, but probably in as soon as February, March, kind of have the next step in planting,
Yeah,
kind of
maybe.
whatever we want to call that. Intermediate planting, I suppose, right? Because you guys have now graduated. You're no longer beginners. You're now intermediate. But keep the questions coming, of course. And remember, Google anything and everything regarding these questions. You'll tend to find the answer on the website. Otherwise, have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and we will see you next time.
See you guys. Talk to you soon.